He's among Mount Gambia's greatest cultural exports since Sir Robert Helpman. Dave Graney has spent his entire adult life in the music industry and was in South Australia this week performing and promoting his memoir, 1001 Australian Nights. Paul Claret caught up with him at his Adelaide book reading.
And when you come from a place in Mount Gambier, I feel funny saying this sometimes as if I'm saying that I'm more authentic than others, and I am.
I should tell you about my power.
He's a rock and roll enigma, roughly hewn from a regional timber town and smoothed over 3 decades to a unique patina. Dave Graney has never been afraid to go against the grain of conventional wisdom, and it won him the 1996 ARIA Award for Best Male Artist.
Soft and Sexy Sound was an album we put out in 1995, and in many ways it was a reaction against grunge rock at the time, because the world was full of post-Nirvana type, angry young American types, and very angst-ridden stuff, long-haired guys with shirts off, beating their chests like monkeys in the jungle. People react to emotion in music, and a lot of my music is quite... It approaches emotion from abstract ways, and more of an observational type thing rather than, primary, raw, outbursts of anguish.
He's now at the tail end of a national tour, promoting a new CD featuring re-recordings of a dozen of his classics.
Night of the Wolverine.
And he's also released a memoir detailing a life of rock and roll.
We then went back and finished the tour. I'd learned a couple of years before that I'd been born with some bad blood, some genetic trash that should have finished me off at about 4 or 5 at the latest. It didn't switch on until many decades later. The whole thing in between was some sort of gift anyway. When it switched on, I started to cough like a coal miner.
It's more than 30 years since Dave Graney and his post-punk band, The Moodists, moved to Melbourne, which he found to be more tame than the country life he'd known.
When I got to Melbourne and people into rock and roll and that, it was never as rough as the country kind of scene that I'd experienced. The fast cars and, booze and hot rods and football, all that kind of stuff. I never really had to go out looking for wild times, because it was all around me when I was a kid. If you'd been born at a certain time and you moved about the floor at your parents' feet, watching the high heels dig and sink into the linoleum floor, and your mother had records by Elvis after the army, Roy Orbison, Buddy Holly, Little Richard and the Kingston Trio, and if you were Catholic and grew up in a small timber town in South Australia, and your father was a painter for the Public Buildings Department...
The memoir ends with the deaths of his parents, who Dave Graney says were supportive of his chosen career.
My father a bit puzzled by many of the things I did, but seemed to make a living out of it, so he thought that was good. And my mother was very hip, to rock and roll and that kind of stuff, and she quite, thought it was pretty cool.
Standing on the street corner, waiting for no one, feeling kind of sporty.
As a youth, Graney played football with the East Gambia club, where his father was a life member. Still a footy fan, he says foreign artists like Lionel Richie and Meatloaf shouldn't be singing at the AFL Grand Final or being paid $600,000.
And I don't think any football people should be involved in choosing whoever it is, because they have shocking taste.
Graney attributes part of his rock and roll longevity to his wife, former St Aloysius College student Claire Moore, who played drums as a teenager with Sister Janet Mead.
You do ask yourself the question, should I be doing this or whatever, but I've also been very lucky to be playing with Claire Moore over the whole period, so we have denied each other the opportunity to ask ourselves the question.
Gonna do the right thing as soon as I see what it is. In the meantime, I'm gonna release your soul.
And if you had read H.P. Lovecraft talking of being the crawling chaos, talking to the audient void, then you would be me, and you would make music like I do in the 21st century.
I'm gonna release your soul.
Paul Clarick there.